Hey there, everybody. This is Pastor Josh over at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, and we are continuing our interview series. And I am just so grateful that Lynn Garbe-Recknagel has agreed to be interviewed today. Lynn, thank you so much for agreeing to this.
You're welcome.
Lynn, how long have you been in San Carlos for?
It's going on 56 years.
Been here for a while.
Yes.
Now you're not originally from here. Where are you from originally?
Now, some people can detect it still, but I'm from New York State, but not New York City, not where they have that broad accent. But I was born in New York City on Manhattan Island.
Were you really?
Yes, I was.
Oh, that's cool. So there's a difference in accents between New York City and New York. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, and there's a Brooklyn accent. That's really strong.
That's a real. I've heard. You could tell Brooklyn accents.
Yeah.
I didn't know this. I did not detect a New York accent in your voice.
My kids say, "Mom, you still have that New York accent." Well, I pronounce my R's. Some New Yorkers don't. They're New Yorkers.
That's
well,
right.
Whatever.
Right.
Anyways, my folks lived in the Bronx. That's a borough of New York. You know.
Yeah.
I was born in Manhattan, as I said, but yeah, they lived in the Bronx for a couple of years, so I don't have very many memories of that. Then we moved up into Westchester County. So that's just north of the Bronx. It's still in New York State.
When did you move over to California? How old were you when you moved?
Just about 30.
You're about 30?
Yeah.
And what brought you over?
Well, it was a business move with my husband, Kathy's dad. And so we came with our 4 children, and we didn't think we were going to stay very long. It was a job. He was a soils engineer, and it was a job on reclaiming the earth so that Redwood Shores could be built. Foster City was already done by then, or kind of done. You know, those shores, the lands out there were mushy, swampy fields.
Yeah. So his job was to kind of make it like to pack
to reclaim. Well, yeah. So yeah. It was an interesting job.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I've heard this before, right? Like that people were slowly filling in the bay to create land. In fact, I heard somewhere that their intention was to fill in entirely the bay.
Well,
but that of course didn't work.
That did not happen. I mean, we have to save the environment when we can.
Right.
But Redwood Shores was already, the land was already there, but it was just not buildable. So there were cows out there.
In Redwood Shores?
Cows out there, yeah, sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting. That's really
a little radio shack was out there. Some radio had their antenna down out there. Out where Pam and Greg live.
Yeah.
Out about there. Yeah.
So it was just fields since
fields. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. And you said you have how many children?
4. I had 4 children.
You have 4 children, and what are their names?
Kathy, Carl, then there was Ginny, Virginia, and Richard. And my Ginny passed away about 17 years ago. But she left us 3 beautiful children. So I have 3 beautiful grandchildren from her. Yeah. And of course, Kathy's too. Yeah. My boys did not have their own children, but one of them has stepchildren, and he's got lots of grandchildren all of a sudden, you know, over the years. So yeah, everybody's happy.
That's awesome. How many grandchildren do you have?
Well, I stopped counting at 10.
That's awesome.
But some of them were like step, and my husband Siggy's two grandchildren,
Mhm.
not my original grandchildren.
Right.
Yeah,
And Siggy was your second husband.
that's correct.
And remind me the name of your first husband again.
Carl.
His name was
Carl
Carl.
Garbe. Yeah.
Carl Garbe. That's
Yeah.
and so I think it's funny. With my family, I have so many people in my family that like I don't even know how many children some of them have, and like I when we're at like family reunions, I just say like, "Who's your mom? Who's your dad?" They go, "Okay, I know who you are now." Like I don't even keep track of them. I don't even try to remember their names anymore because there's.
Well, it's gotten like this around here, but when I was young, I had I'm an only child. My cousin Marlene was an only child. Then there was a kind of a half cousin, Ralph. He was an only child. Then there was another Ralph, and he was Marlene's cousin. And he was an only child. Nobody had many children back in the 30s.
Hmm.
And I wanted to dwell on that a little bit about the 30s.
Tell me about it.
Well, it was very different than it is now. And I lived in a small town just north of New York City.
Mhm.
And we all went through the war together.
Yeah.
And I think there was rationing, even our shoes, even kids' shoes.
What was that like to ration food or to ration items? Like what did it mean to ration stuff?
Well, my mother did most of the rationing because she's the shopper. But there were some times when there were some days you couldn't buy meat, and other times you could buy meat. And then their gasoline was rationed.
So was it that just the stores didn't sell meat on certain days, or was it families were expected to only buy meat twice a week or 3 times a week?
I can't remember all that. I was a kid.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
I remember trying to ruin a pair of shoes I didn't like, and my mother knocked on the window and said, "Don't you scrape up those shoes. They're not going to get another one." Because you couldn't.
Yeah.
But I was old enough to go around collecting newspaper and tin cans and, donate it to wherever, like it got reclaimed. We made whatever airplanes out of it. My father worked in an airplane factory in those days, building little planes that flew in the war.
He built like fighter planes, is that kind of thing?
Yeah, it was called the Grumman Avenger.
Oh.
Of course, propellers, So,
right.
Yeah. So that was his job during the war. That's when I was growing up.
I'm going to look at what that plane looks like later on. I want to see what it looks like.
It looks so tiny now, little propellers.
And what did your father do after the war?
Well, he became a bookkeeper.
Oh, okay.
He was interested in numbers. At one time, prior to the war, he was in real estate. That was not a good time to be in real estate because nobody could buy houses. So we were kind of scratching around.
Yeah.
But I was always happy, and I was always fed, and I was always clothed. My mother made a lot of my clothes, and she knit a lot of my sweaters. She even knit me a bathing suit one time.
A bathing suit?
A bathing suit.
Wow. I would not think that a bathing suit would be knit.
Well, you wouldn't think it. And that was kind of an experiment. So I had grandparents that had a little cabin up in New Hampshire. And we'd go there for a couple of weeks for vacation. And so I went down to the lake with my folks, and I got into the lake with this knit bathing suit, and it started stretching, and the legs went down. I mean, it didn't stretch at the top so much, but the legs, and it went down my legs. It was supposed to look like shorts. And it looked more like, well, not quite as far as pedal pushers, but anyway. So my mother hemmed these things up again because she said, "You don't have another bathing suit, so you're gonna have to wear this until we go home," But that was kind of funny that it kind of, as soon as the water hit it, it just stretched like mad.
So bathing suits have changed over the years, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you were younger, they looked more like shorts. Is that what I'm hearing?
Little bit like shorts.
A little bit like shorts. Did they
Yeah.
have like did you wear like a full top, or was it more like
Oh,
a
no, my mother wore those things that, I mean, the men wore things that looked like their undershirts on the top, you know, but
Mhm.
that was before mine. That was my father's generation.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, when I got to be a teenager, bikinis were starting to come in,
Okay. Okay.
or a forerunner of bikinis.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I had a two-piece bathing suit at one time. That was like shocking. And then I had another bathing suit that had only one strap over the shoulder.
Mm.
Those were my
Yeah.
teen years. I'm
And
telling you things that I wasn't planning on telling you.
fashion changes, and when you were describing a bathing suit, I had one image in mind, and it obviously wasn't that image, right? And
Well,
so, because I think of modern day bathing suits, and I was like, how did that work? But no, of course they're different. They look different back
yeah, they're different.
then. So that's really fascinating, though. Did you go to the lake often with family? Was
This
that
was
like?
in New Hampshire. It was a 200-mile drive. We only went once a summer,
Mm.
but we stayed for a couple of weeks.
And like like different parts of your family would go and converge on this lake together? Is that?
No, it was my grandparents' little lodge. They called it Loken Lodge after their two sons.
Hmm.
My father was Lowell and his brother was like Kenneth. So anyway, so they built that just prior to the Second World War. And then they couldn't do anything much more. No telephone, a well that didn't hold a whole lot of water. We had to be really careful with the water.
Mhm.
And we used to go out to the outhouse.
Oh, it
That's
had
all.
like an outhouse as well.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had an outhouse in the woods.
Yeah.
It was several acres, the land that he bought.
Was the outhouse between two trees?
It was in a little forest.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
Interesting. When I see pictures of old outhouses, I often see two trees next to them, and so I just wondered if that's a thing. You're giving me such a history lesson here, Lynn. This is really
Well,
fascinating.
yeah. And it was at the lake. My father and his parents had vacationed around that lake before that little house was built. So they rented a house, and my father would point out which ones he'd actually stayed in his youth, you know.
That's
And it
cool.
was about a mile long. It was called Granite Lake. The deepest spot in it was a little over 100 feet. So it was a good sized lake.
Do you know anything about this lake today? Is it still around?
Yes, it is still around.
Oh, cool. That's great.
But
What?
then the highway went behind our house finally. So the little road is not used to get there. So it's a little more quiet, I would say.
How old were you when World War II started?
About 6 or 7.
6 or 7. Did you have any family members who fought in the war?
Not actually, no.
No. No.
My father's youngest brother had a friend that was in the Second World War. My uncle was deaf in one ear, and so he didn't qualify.
Mm, interesting.
So
Yeah.
we were lucky, and my father was a little too old, so missed it.
Yeah. What else do you want me to know about when you were younger? Like what do you want people to know about when you were younger? Like what other, I mean, this is fascinating stories. I could listen to
Well,
you.
those are the stories I didn't expect to tell. Um, well, you know, I was a violinist.
Mm. When
So
did
when
you
I,
start playing?
well, there you go.
Yeah.
I wanted to start playing in third grade, but I was homesick when they gave out the instruments. When I got back to school, all the violins were gone. So I waited an entire year and made sure I wasn't sick the next year at the wrong time. And I started in fourth grade.
You started playing violin in fourth grade,
In
and
fourth
then
grade.
and what um d- tell me more about your violin playing. Like where did you play? When did you stop playing?
I stopped playing about 11 years ago.
So you can
Anyways,
50,
but
60 years, the violin,
least,
at
yes,
least.
yes, I played, and I was pretty good at playing even by Christmas of that first year. We got them in September, you know. By Christmas time, I could play a Christmas carol. I think it was O Little Town of Bethlehem. And so my music teacher in school said, hey, you're getting way ahead of the other kids. You need to have a private teacher because, you know, we don't fit anymore.
Yeah.
So I had my parents found a private teacher for me. She'd come to the house every week and I'd have a half an hour lesson. And then when I was about in, well, I don't know, 14 or 15, somebody in our apartment house, we lived in an apartment house, 4-story walk up, and we walked up. So anyways, there was somebody in the apartment that said, oh, gee, you know, I'm playing in this amateur symphony in White Plains. Now, White Plains is the county seat of Westchester County. So courthouse is there, all that stuff. Anyways, so that gentleman took me to this adult orchestra where I could play more classical symphony music. So that went on, and then I had some special lessons in New York City when my violin teacher said, you got to have some lessons from my mentor, more or less. So I got special lessons down there. Meanwhile, my music teacher in grade school, we went all the way to 9th grade. We didn't have a freshman year. That was all the way to 9th grade before we moved on. So he would take his music classes down to the Metropolitan Opera on a school bus twice a year. So I got exposed to opera. And my private violin teacher was very much into going down to solo performances. Jascha Heifetz, Yehudi Menuhin, Isaac Stern, somebody named Joseph Fuchs. And I saw recitals by all these professionals at one time or another. So got exposed.
What was it like? I mean, I'll be honest, I've never really played an instrument before. I played a little guitar, like I taught myself a little guitar. But what's it like to be a violinist and to hear somebody play the violin
Oh,
really well?
heaven. It's heaven to be
Yeah.
there. Oh my gosh.
That's it would seem amazing because you know what it takes to play, and to hear somebody who's just, you know, astonishing would be
Well, I was never top notch, but I still had a lovely time. And so during that time that I was learning the violin, before I got out of 9th grade, even, I guess I might have been in 8th grade, my violin teacher said, why don't you start teaching our little beginners? This was in the school, you know, general public school. I was one of 30 people in a class. And my class, that was the only class, you know, like we were in the 2nd grade, we were those people. 3rd grade, we were the same people. No double, you know, no 2 or 3 2nd graders, grades, you know, classes. So yeah. So anyways, it was a very personal school.
That's cool.
It was a public school, but the town that I lived in was only 8,000 people.
Oh, you small town, right?
Yeah, so our school did not grow until after the war when people started having more children.
Do you remember what drew you to the violin? Because you said you wanted to play.
I don't know, you know, I probably saw it someplace and, you know, thought, gee, that looks nice. I don't know.
Oh, just who knows? Sometimes people are like, I just, you know, sometimes people have stories behind that, but he's like, that's cool too.
So then after graduating, I went to Manhattan School of Music,
Mm.
and I have a four-year degree in Manhattan School of Music, the major in violin. I won't tell you my minor because I can hardly play it.
What was the minor?
Piano. I know I can pick out the keys, but I was never very good at piano.
Are you afraid I'm going to ask you to play?
Yes.
I won't ask you to play, Lynn.
Good.
Oh, oh. And so did you ever play for an orchestra later on in life after you graduated?
Not for, but in.
That's what I'm, yes. Did you play
Yes.
in an orchestra?
Yes. Well, that was the Westchester Symphony where that man took me to, be in with the adults and play.
Mm.
And so I played classical big time music,
Mhm.
like Beethoven symphonies and stuff
Wow.
before I got out of high school. But my mountaintop experience was at Manhattan School of Music when a very famous conductor came every fall and did the fall semester.
Mm.
And his name was Jonel Perlea. And he was the director of the Milan Opera Company. And so he came in the fall time when the opera wasn't going, and then he'd go back to Italy. And in that series of 4 years that I was there, each year we did one Brahms symphony. There's only 4 of them. And so they are just to die for. I mean, really, they're so lush.
Mm.
They're, not as basic as Bach, some of the other earlier composers. So yeah, Brahms, just amazing.
How do you spell Brahm?
Brahms. Oh,
You don't know?
not BRAHM.
Oh, Brahm, of course.
Brahms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there any particular pieces of music that you listen to that maybe it's violin, maybe it's not, that just make your heart sing still? That is your piece of music that you just love?
Well, the Brahms are beautiful, and I was looking to see if I had a CD of Brahms. I know I have records of Brahms.
Oh, cool.
I can't find any CDs of the Brahms symphonies. And I got a pile of those CDs, but I was looking the other day. No.
Let me tell you something interesting about my youngest son, Isaac. He recently got a record player, and he just got his first record,
Whoa.
which is it's a record of Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald. And
I love jazz. I'm not just classical.
He just listens to it all the time.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So it's really cool. Like, I mean, record players he just loves the thing. He just loves it. So I can't wait to get him some more records. It's just so cool.
Yeah.
So what other pieces is there any other pieces of music that you just kind of, that you gravitate towards?
Well, I like jazz.
You like jazz?
And I do enjoy old time popular music.
Mm.
And the last thing that I played in was a little orchestra that did old time popular music. And it's called Golden Gate Radio Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to retire from that because my hand gave out. So
it just wasn't working for you anymore.
Oh, and it was the same time my back gave out. So
yeah,
that was that.
Mm.
So once in a while I catch something on PBS that I really enjoy. And one was Joshua Bell. There was I'm sorry, that thing pops up.
Lynn, when this is over, and when COVID is over, I would like to come over and I want you to play some records for me, Brahm specifically, if you still have them.
Yeah, I'd have to dig. Yeah.
I'd love to hear some records with you. So what else have
something popping up on my screen that's making noise? I'm sorry. I don't know how to get rid of it.
It's okay. Yeah. what else about your early years should we know?
Well, as I say, I was an only child, but I had a cousin called Marlene,
Mm-hmm.
and we were born around the same time. I was April and she was August. So then our mothers waited until the second baby, and then we got baptized together. A pastor Blasey, I think, and he was a Lutheran pastor. My parents, I think, were married by this same pastor
Mm.
a few years before that. And so we were like almost like sisters,
Mm.
except that we were separated in distance. So my mother and I would take the train down to Grand Central Station, get on the subway, and take the subway to Brooklyn. She lived in Brooklyn. We lived up in the suburbs. And we also would spend part of our summer vacation together because they were related to my uncle's brother who had a resort in the Catskill Mountains. So that's up the Hudson River. It's about 100 or more miles up the Hudson River from New York City. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area. And so my uncle's brother had bought that property. It was an old rundown rooming house kind of thing. But over the years, it's still in the family.
Oh.
It's into its third generation and so many improvements. But we spent many summers together. Our mothers kind of dressed us alike sometimes, or at least the same skirt with it in a different color.
Mm-hmm. My
And
so
and
it
up
was like
there,
having a sister.
yeah, it was like having a sister.
Yeah.
And that was a German American resort. So mostly all Germans, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I met Carl, my first husband.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my cousin Marlene met Siegfried, who happened to be my second husband. Because my dear cousin Marlene died when she was 57. And so, yeah, eventually I married her husband. Sounds awful. But we were such a close family. It was like marrying somebody. I mean, he was in our family.
Yeah.
I knew him for 40 years,
Yeah. It nobody would even bat an eye at that happening nowadays,
Oh, but I was happy being single,
Mm-hmm.
Divorced from Kathy's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of taken, wait a minute, I don't think I want to marry anybody again. But we kind of got together, but he had to retire first. He lived in Connecticut. I live out here. We decided he'd come here. So he pulled up roots, came out here for, until his death.
The man retired and picked up his whole life to come and be with you.
Yes.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, especially towards retirement age when you're kind of settled, in who you are and what you want. And I think that just shows the kind of relationship that you all had. I mean, that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I would have never thought it before, but then she died, and he said, I've always admired you. So
and you're like, sure, let's.
no, I didn't say sure right away.
Yeah.
Not interested.
Did you think it was weird first when
Yes. Yeah.
did you think it was kind of, like,
Well,
hey, yeah.
yeah.
But eventually you changed your mind?
Yeah.
And you were married for how long?
Almost 20 years. Oh, it was, anyways, she sang. She was a singer. Marlene was a singer. I was the violinist. So she sang at my wedding to Carl, Kathy's dad. She She was my maid of honor. I mean, it was a real close family.
Yeah. Were you her maid of honor?
I was her matron of honor because I was already married when she got married to Siegfried. And Kathy was the flower girl.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's
So
great.
yes, we kept it all in the family.
Yeah. Yeah, you took that matron of honor duty really seriously,
I sure
fair
did.
enough. um, Let me, okay, can we switch gears for a second?
Sure.
Uh, everybody has ideals that they live up to, that they want to live up to, ideals that they value. What are some sort of ideals, values that are really important to you, Lynn?
Well, being truthful and honest for one thing.
You value honesty. Why do you value honesty?
I was just brought up that way. You don't tell lies.
Yeah.
Yeah. It stood me in good stead.
Yeah. It's somebody once said, it's hard to how does it go? You have to remember the lies that you tell, right? So it's just better to tell the truth.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Right. Besides which, being an only children, there's nobody to hide behind. Really, we were brought up very well by our parents. Mm-hmm. My mother stayed home until I was a latchkey kid, when I was able to come home and practice my violin and do my homework. By then she was got back into being the secretary. But, until then she stayed home. Yeah. Took care of me. So I learned, I liked sports a lot too.
What kind of sports did you like?
My father taught me to play tennis. And then we did ice skating, first on the little pond right near it was the Sawmill River. And there was a little pond down by our station, kind of bumpy because, it would freeze over and then the snow would come on top of it and that would freeze in bumps. So, yeah. And I did roller skating, only outside roller skating, with the kind of roller skates that clamp onto your shoes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Damage your shoes. Uh-huh. You had a key to turn this thing till it tightened on your. Have you ever heard of a skate key? You probably haven't.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, these are like clamps. And then when you're screwing it on the skate, it's clamping onto your shoe.
That's awesome.
I thought like you would not know that.
No, I mean, I've seen skates like that, I think, but the key.
Well, they're relics. They're antiques,
Sure.
Too bad I don't have mine. But we did it on concrete, it wasn't in a rink. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did that, and I did ice skating, and I finally got to, doing figure skating.
You did figure skating?
I did figure skating for a while, but I was too old to start. I took some lessons. I had to get on a bus and go over to Rye, New York, from Hartsdale, where I lived, and took figure skating. But the little kids were better, better to start early.
The older you get, the harder their ice gets.
Yeah.
I went ice skating with my children probably over a year ago now, and
I wouldn't.
And so I was, on the ice, and I can skate okay. I not great, but I slipped and I fell, and I was like, oh man, this hurts. That's hard ice. The kids just bounce back up. They don't mind.
Sure. The last time I did ice skating, I skated as an adult with Kathy. She was a Girl Scout, and my ankles were so tired then. But when I was taking the figure skating, your ankles get strong, your muscles get strong. You don't even have to lace up the boots tight.
Right.
Because, you don't tip over.
It's no big deal, right?
Yeah. And I also was taught skiing. Somebody in the apartment house where we lived, and he came from Austria, Mr. Stadelman. You know,
Stadelman.
I was, you know, there were a lot of German people around. But anyways, we would go to the, it was a golf club, and we go across and go under the fence, across the street, under the fence, and climb the hills and the golf course. And that's where I learned how to ski.
That's cool.
And then one year, the golf course got really nice enough to build a little rope tow, so you didn't have to walk up the hills, this one hill, but that didn't last very long. Then he said, well, you're gonna have to go someplace where there's something a little bit more. So he arranged an overnight trip. Now, this does not sound racy. He had a lady that liked to ski too. So she was my roomer, and we went overnight up someplace up the Hudson River, someplace, I can't remember exactly where. And we skied on a regulation ski slope.
Cool.
And then later on, later, when Siggy was around and he was dating my cousin Marlene, we went to the German resort in the wintertime, and they were right near a chairlift ski resort. In fact, those cousins were ski instructors in the wintertime. So there was a lot of skiing done at that point.
That's cool.
Yeah. The skis were old, you know, different and funny. And then the boots are funny, and then it changes again. Then you gotta get another set that looks a little different. And then finally the new ones. Well, I haven't been on new skis in a long time. The last time I skied, I think, was when my grandchildren were just little kids. That's about 30 years ago.
Do you miss skiing or roller skating at all?
No, really.
Yeah.
Not the way I am now. Now I'm walking around on a walker.
Yeah. Do you yeah. Do you I'll ask that another time. Let's switch. Can I ask you about faith? What how would you define faith?
I guess it's just belief in Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Yeah.
I have a little history about faith and my relatives. And my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, gave me this book. It's by Charles Dickens.
The Life of Our Lord. Oh, interesting.
This is not a first edition, but it's very early on. Yeah. Charles Dickens wrote this, and it says on the bottom, written for his children during the years 1846 to 1849. He had children. He wrote it. He didn't want it published until after his death. And my grandfather found out about this and got that book. And he used to read me one chapter every Sunday when we'd walk up to his house. And so, you know, I was kind of grounded in the faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does your faith mean to you now, as you know, somebody who
it gives me strength. It gives me strength to go on every day.
That's wonderful. Do you have any particular stories that you love from scripture, or prayers that you love that you go back to?
Not particularly. I like to read our daily readings, and then I forget where they came from. So I can't just name a piece of scripture, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Do you and how how long have you been a member of HTLC for?
Just as long as we got here. As soon as we bought this house, we found Holy Trinity.
Wow.
And we knew Pastor Beilstein. He was still our pastor for a couple of years. Yeah. And then when he retired, I kept track of him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they moved into a little house up in South San Francisco, I think, first, or, you know, one of those little towns. Then they moved down to Sunnyview. I visited him there. I introduced him to Siegfried. So, you know, he knew Carl from years ago. So, yes, he was still living when he said, well, if you hurry up, I'll marry you guys. You know, but unfortunately, he passed away before our wedding, you know, because we
Yeah.
took a long time, you know, with this moving and all that stuff. And
For those of you who don't know, Pastor Bellstein was the founding pastor of Holy Trinity. So I think that's awesome that you
yeah,
knew him.
yeah. And when we came, of course, Helen Bard, the only, the last of the living charter members, I knew some of the other charter members too. Lorraine
Yeah.
Morris was here then. Ruby Phillips, Ruby Phillips and Walt Phillips, they were there, but they're not charters.
Right.
Oh, yeah, so we just lost Helen last year.
And Ruby just before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's um I really loved Ruby Phillips because she had this real just she was a real straight shooter, and she like had this way of talking that like she just got to the point in some ways, and I just really loved that about her. Like she didn't mince words all that much.
No,
She
she
said what
didn't.
she thought, and I loved that about her.
Absolutely.
And I really liked her for that.
Yeah.
So um do you have any significant events at Holy Trinity that you remember?
Oh, well, we had a very active women's group and the men.
Mhm.
And we were, well, our women nowadays, they're really involved in the church. So I
Mhm.
can't say that they're not involved. But we had circles and we had general meetings from these circles. Like once a month, we had a general meeting. We had actually a women's board, so on and so forth. We put on things. We had fashion shows.
Fashion shows. That's cool.
One time it was home fashion things, you know. So I think I was parading along with two of my kids, two of my girls probably, with clothes that I made them and myself. And then one time we were supposed to model our wedding gowns. Well, I keep bumping into something and slipping here. Anyways, I couldn't fit in my wedding gown anymore. So there was a nice slim woman that could fit in it. So she modeled my wedding gown. But a lot of people did that.
That's cool. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And we had another one where we knew this elderly, that she was elderly, we were younger, right? So this elderly woman that had a costume collection of various eras, like the flapper era
Yeah.
and the real old fashioned ones from the 1900s, early 1900s. She had all these costumes and she would do a program for us. So she would have us come up to her home and see which costume fit which person. So we were all outfitted in different people. And so there was some flapper costumes. And one was my daughter Ginny was a flapper, and the other flapper was Chris Kidwell. And several other people, about 5 women were flappers.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So Chris, you know, was very fond of my daughter Ginny,
Hmm.
who was, you know, a lively young person. So, anyways, we have good memories.
Yeah. Do we're coming up on about an hour now, so
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one last question, if that's okay. What are your hopes for our congregation?
Well, my hopes are that we can spread the word a little more
Mm.
and, and introduce new people to our life with Christ.
Mm.
and especially children, that I don't think people are thinking that that's so important for kids, anymore, to go to church and learn things in Sunday school like I did. I was a Methodist as a child because the Lutheran church was too far away. But anyway, I grew up Methodist. Anyways, I went to church every Sunday by myself if my mother didn't feel like going.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday school, youth fellowship. We had a blast with youth fellowship. Our pastor was really, anyways.
Yeah.
So that's what we need is young life, pastor who's young, and there you are. So,
well, I definitely agree with you, spreading the word of Jesus and really being a congregation that
and knowing that you can have fun too at
right.
church. It's not just sitting in a pew,
For sure.
That's the companionship that you have.
Mm-hmm. The community is so important. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed and having this conversation with me. I just appreciate it so much.